Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for The Walking Dead Season 6, Episode 12, Not Tomorrow Yet. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of The Walking Dead. So I have to give a spoiler warning for The Walking Dead up to Season 6, Episode 12. If you haven't seen up to this episode, you may not want to watch this video, otherwise some things will be spoiled for you. So tonight's episode was quite an unexpected thrill ride. It starts off a bit slow, a bit heavily character based, and at first I thought the whole episode would be another filler build-up type episode that just builds up to the huge battle. But it wasn't. We got a lot of action in this episode, and that was cool. But I did get the feeling that some of the more character-based moments that were intercut with the fighting felt kind of shoehorned in, and I didn't completely buy them. But that's just a minor complaint in the grand scheme of things, because overall this episode was high stakes, really intense episode, and threw its emotional punches very well. So we start the episode on Carol with what I thought was a very effective scene where Carol is baking cookies for everyone, and we see that she has become quite chummy with Tobin, has had this cute little banter, which seems to be laying the groundwork for a romance between them. But before this episode, you barely see these two together, and Carol seems to hold disdain for all of the Alexandrians. So yeah, having this one scene at the start of the episode is an attempt to set up this romance, and in the end it does little to make it feel like it didn't come out of nowhere, but nice try, A for effort. But this is the first time we really see Carol since the incident with Morgan and the wolf, and indeed we did get a scene with Morgan, whom apparently she hasn't talked to since that incident. But in that episode I said that I felt Carol was really affected by what happened because she killed the wolf when he had just saved Denise's life. A lot of people like to point to the fact that Morgan fucked up by not killing the wolf, but overall they overlook that ultimately his philosophy was proven somewhat correct because the wolf saved Denise's life. And to thank him for it, Carol killed him. So I think that had an effect on her, and it got her to the point where she was questioning her whole kill first, ask questions later philosophy. And of course at the end of the scene we get this really nice touch that I loved, where they pulled out and we see that Carol was standing by Sam's grave the whole time, which she left a cookie on. That was such a touching moment, but more than that, it shows that Sam's death is another thing that really affected her. Obviously, there's no way she could know that it was her words that made him freak out and got him killed, but still, she probably feels really guilty for how she treated him, and perhaps she does blame herself for his death. But honestly, she bloody well should. So I think this triggered her whole maternal instinct, and so she goes around making cookies for everyone. And bear in mind, she's no longer has to put on this act of being a housewife. Everyone in Alexandria knows she's a badass fighter now, so she's doing it because she wants to. Anyway, I thought her character story in this episode was awesome and very nicely handled. So next we see Rick and crew return and tell everyone about the plan to attack the Saviors in order to get food from Hilltop. And even though Carol is kind of changed to person, she's still badass and she's still down to kill some people, but it's apparent she doesn't take pleasure in it. She's not going out there to kill people for fun, she just wants to do it what's necessary. But Rick told everyone the plan and asked if anyone objects, and as expected, Morgan spoke up against it. If you think he'd learn from his mistake with keeping the wolf alive, nope, of course not. His philosophy of not killing and all life is precious runs deep. So Morgan's plan is to talk to the Saviors and threaten them into submission, but Rick rightfully says that eliminates the element of surprise, which at the moment is their biggest advantage. So Rick asks if anyone agrees with Morgan, but Aaron speaks up in support of Rick's plan, and all the other Alexandrians seem to be with him, as Rick has completely earned their respect after the whole incident with killing all the zombies that took over Alexandria. And then Rick makes it clear to Morgan that he doesn't have to kill if he doesn't want to, but he does have to accept that they will. Jumping ahead a bit later in the episode, we see Morgan wielding something, and I've got absolutely no idea what the hell that's about. I do really wonder if Morgan is going to fuck things up. However, personally, I think everyone assumes Morgan is wrong, because typically on the show, whenever anyone shows mercy, it leads to disaster. And typically the lesson they try to drill over and over and over again is you have to shoot first and ask questions later. But before the half season started, I talked about how interesting I think it would be if they changed things up and showed Morgan actually being right. And I think there's a real possibility that they may be laying the groundwork for that in the mid-season premiere with The Wolf. And I think this could be a situation where Rick's shoot-first philosophy kind of backfires on them horribly. Because we know from comic book fans and other sources that Negan and the Saviors are going to be a major adversary for a while. So it's not going to be, the easy in and out job that Rick expects it to be. So in other words, we do know Rick's plan will backfire in some way. I think it would make very interesting, very dynamic storytelling if Morgan was proven right instead of coming off as a naive idiot who messes things up all the time. But we'll see where they take this. So, we get a lot of love in this episode. I already mentioned Carol and Tobin, but they also emphasize Tara and Denise. And of course, we see Abraham break up with Rosita, and boy does he suck at breakups. Oh, I thought you were the last woman on Earth, but you're not. What a fucking prick. I mean, come on. The guy's kind of ugly and Rosita's hot, if you ask me. She should be the one dumping him, but whatever. Anyway, I was saying last couple of weeks, if they emphasize a romance, that means someone involved in that romance is going to die. I mentioned Rick and Michonne, Glenn and Maggie, Sasha and Abraham. So now we add Carol and Tobin and Tara and Denise to the list. So yeah, I think they're kind of trying us here to make it harder to guess who is going to die. I mean, there are other pairs out there like Aaron and his boyfriend or Carl and Enid, but they haven't really emphasized those recently. It's when they emphasize it as being a happy relationship that you need to worry about them. And I'm still sticking with the huge red flags I got when Maggie and Glenn were being all lovey-dovey over the ultrasound pictures. And the fact that Maggie even went there in the first place makes me really worry about her, let alone where she ends up at the end of the episode, but I'll get more into that a bit later. The interesting thing with Maggie is how Carol reacts to her coming along, because this new self-doubting Carol seems to want to preserve Maggie's innocence and thinks she should focus more on being a mother, mainly because she doesn't want Maggie to go into the same dark place that she has, and thinks that she still has a chance to be a happy mother, a way of life that's completely out of the question for Carol, and I think she really regrets that. So we get this awesome sequence of Rick's team storming the Savior's compound, and that was awesome. It was just a tense and effective sequence that really does the job and does it really well. Rick's team came off as such badasses, and we first see these guys being dicks to the dude from Hilltop, and you kind of feel like these assholes had it coming, and you kind of cheer when Daryl sneaks up behind that guy and slits his throat, and when Glenn sees all these pictures with guys with their heads bashed in, that also adds to the sense that these assholes really deserved what they got. But on the other hand, it kind of flips the traditional hero thing on its head by having the quote-unquote good guys going around shoving knives into people's heads while they're sleeping. That's a real questionable and shady thing. It was such an edgy and risky thing to do, and to be honest, I personally think this was The Walking Dead at its best, and one of the best moments in the show thus far, because it's really risky and edgy to have your heroes act like villains in such a way, even though it's justifiable because these guys are no saints, but, come on, they're going around killing people in their sleep. So in a way, these guys are kind of justified in fighting back, and you see that, that one dude on the motorcycle who's just like, oh, you're going around killing me, you're just going to kill me like you kill everyone else. Yeah, that's what these guys did to that's what these guys are doing. But they did do, some shady things to the Hilltop crew, and, so they kind of deserved it, but still, Rick's crew are no heroes in this situation. Especially seeing Aaron going around firing a machine gun like Rambo, when Aaron comes off as a really sweet, really nice, likable guy, and to see him acting like Rambo was a really jarring image, and kind of illustrated the dark side of Rick's philosophy. And, there may be some really dire consequences for what they're doing now. And Morgan's approach might have been proven to be the better approach. Because here's another thing I can foresee coming, knowing that the Saviors are going to be a long-term thing, that this one compound isn't it. This isn't all of the Saviors. Like Michonne said, oh, I wonder which of these guys is leaking. But of course we know the answer is none of them. And if I were to guess, I would say this compound is only one out of many that the Saviors had, and that the payback for what they did here is going to be devastating. So to that end, it's time for me to speculate once again on who's going to die. And I have alluded to earlier, I think they're purposely making this pretty impossible to predict. But however, as we know, we end this episode with Maggie and Carol in the hands of the Saviors, or at least that's what we're told. Maybe they're lying and just learned their names somehow and are bluffing, but it would appear that they are in the hands of the Saviors. So my big guess is either one or both of them will die. And of course, my money's on Maggie. Previously, I said I favored Glenn to die over Maggie, but I'm now switching that. I think Maggie's going to die, and Glenn will live on. And yes, I know that's not what happened in the comics, but the show changes things from the comics so frequently, you can't really trust that or go by that. I just think they won't have her give birth at all. I'm sure one or two of them will die because of the lovey-dovey scene with the ultrasound, but I'm now thinking Maggie will. And I had previously put Carol on the untouchable list. I'm now taking her off that list with her sudden change in character in this episode and her being all lovey-dovey with Tobin. I think now that she's up for grabs to die. Not to say I think she definitely will die, but I think she's fair game. Honestly, I think everyone on the show except for Rick and Carl are fair game. Rick is the main guy, they're not going to kill him, and Carl just lost an eye, so they're not going to kill him just after that. They want to develop him more with losing an eye. But everyone else, even fan favorites like Daryl, Michonne, Carol, I think are up for grabs. But we'll see. However, the people I think that are an absolute shoo-in for the grave are Tara and Heath. They're done for because they're gone off on their own with the impression that they just killed all of the Saviors, which we know is not the case. So I think the Saviors are going to turn up with Tara and Heath's dead bodies, or with them alive and kill them in front of everyone. And ultimately, I'm predicting a lot of deaths by the end of season 6. If we include all of the minor characters and everyone, although not the red shirts, but just the people who has names or whose names we know, I'd say at least 5 people will die before the end of the season, but we'll see. And before I go, I do have to mention Father Gabriel and how a lot of people were really happy with him in this episode and how he's completely turned into a badass now and is, really good at killing people. I think he was fine in this episode. I do like him a lot more than I did before, but I do think he's also a very serious contender for the grave. So my rating for Not Tomorrow Yet out of 10 is a 9, excellent. I nearly gave this episode a 10, but as I said, some of the more emotional scenes about all the love and all the regret about killing felt a bit clunky and overdone at times. But overall, this episode was simply amazing. I love the character development with Carol. I love the tension with Father Gabriel. I absolutely love the tense action scenes and how risky it was to have the heroes of the show act like assassins. So that's it for my review of Not Tomorrow Yet. Be sure to check back here every week for a new review on The Walking Dead, and be sure to check out my channel for many more videos on shows like Game of Thrones, Star Trek, Better Call Saul, Vikings, and House of Cards, and much more. And make sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.